So, hello everyone, and welcome to Tessiant Talks. So we're here today to talk about a topic that I guess sometimes can feel quite simple, but actually is quite complicated. The topic of buy versus build when it comes to AI. And I guess I say complicated because there's a whole host of things that one has to consider there in terms of, you know, the stack and what one controls and what's commodity and how the organization delivers value from that. So before we get stuck in, I guess doing some introductions. My name's Yemi. I have recently joined Tessiant actually, but I've spent 17 years or so in the sort of tech and digital transformation space, and now working closely with Anna to help lead AI strategy at Tessiant. Alex, do you want to go next?
Thanks, Yemi. I'm Alex. I'm CTO for CI&T in EMEA. We are a tech transformation specialist helping large enterprises to navigate technology change at scale.
Hi, I'm Anna Barsby. I'm one of the founders and managing partners here at Tessiant. I'm delighted to be here and welcome Yemi to the team.
Hi, Simon Pakenham-Walsh. I'm the CIO at River Island. I've been there for 2 years, but I've sort of have long background of retail and various other industries, leading technology.
So I guess let's get into it. And maybe before we kind of jump straight into the buy versus build question, I think maybe, you know, to kind of take away from the theory and get into the reality, maybe it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about how, you know, how companies are using AI. So maybe Simon, you could sort of start off with some examples, I guess, of where AI is kind of feeding itself into River Island. And
from my perspective, AI is one of sort of three core things that I think lots of retailers in particular are starting to look at, predominantly around efficiency. So you've got data that's been around for a long time. How do you bring your data together? How do you access it? And how do you derive insight from it? You've got automation. So we've all got lots of legacy. We've all got lots of systems, lots of repeatable tasks. So automation has been sort of around for quite a while, and that's starting to get a bit more sophisticated. And now AI's come on the scene, and understanding what part that plays in both those areas as well. And from my perspective, I'm trying to make sure that people don't need to make that choice as to, is this a data question? Is this an automation question? Or is this an AI question? So we're trying to sort of get it from, but for the AI piece to be scalable and accessible by everyone, we're trying to move it from sort of experimentation, which lots of people are experimenting both in their personal lives and in their corporate lives. It needs to become foundational. And so I think that's the tipping point that we're at with River Island. And we've got lots of people using it, either recognized using it or using it in their personal on their personal devices or at home. And we're trying to make sure that it's foundational. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But the main areas is generative AI. Generative AI is the most common use of it. So lots of people, ChatGPT is the biggest component of that. Lots of people are used to sort of throwing things into ChatGPT and letting it, you know, spit out something that is reworded or condensed or summarized into something that they think will be right for the context they give it. And so we're seeing more and more of that, and actually people using it, probably being over-reliant on that. And when you just ask for sort of a response on an email, you get something that is very obviously been curated in ChatGPT. So you've got that. The more sophisticated use cases, I think are a little bit more inconsistent into how we're using it and whether people believe in it and how you get that sort of confidence around it. And that's part of that step change of moving it from sort of experimental and to foundational, because there's more dependencies on it. So that's, you know, if you think about how we trade, how we collate all the information together, the actual decision making rather than just this is all the information, summarize it in this way.
There's a journey that people go on, right? And the same with any technology where, as you say, the beginning of that journey, I guess, is a lot of that efficiency and sort of productivity gains. As you mature, I guess, in your understanding of the technology, you're then starting to move into, you know, well, how can we take that efficiency, productivity, start to get some better quality outputs and kind of value for the business? And I guess eventually where people want to end up is that place where, you know, like, as you say, it becomes a bit more of a foundational, almost architecture of the business cognitively that is about how you operate as a business rather than, you know, these siloed experiments here and there. I mean, Alex, in terms of your, you know, clients that you're working with, does that sort of track as far as how they're adopting?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, there is a real step change in people moving from these kind of, as you say, siloed experiments towards trying to be more deliberate, trying to track ROI, trying to have a decent roadmap. And that's a very difficult step for a lot of our customers, because in reality, it's the difference between sort of trying something in the lab, in a sort of isolated space, one or two people working together who are very tightly coordinated, compared to integrating with the rest of the business, thinking about if you have a customer facing system, the tone of voice angle, the legal dimension, those kinds of considerations are way beyond what the sort of starting point of noodling around with different technologies. And a lot of the time, that challenge isn't just that it's a broadening of scope, it's that it's a change in expectation, behavior, and I guess being more deliberate about this initiative. So actually recognizing that you're not trying to build a system that could do something cool on its own, you're trying to do something that could be transformative for the company, and that the company needs to be ready for that, and there needs to be a plan and a real commitment to do this. We found various techniques to help our customers navigate that, but there is that step change needed, and often it's not easy to make that on your own. You need sort of some organizational apparatus to get ready for it, internal capability, and so on.
Lovely segue to sort of jump to you, Anna, because I guess, it feels like, to make that step change, as you're saying, it's much more of an organizational, collective, decision that needs to be made, rather than just sitting in the technology function. I mean, Anna, is that sort of, what you see with a lot of the people that you speak to?
Yeah, it's really, really an interesting time for the C-suite, because AI, while on the one hand is just another set of tools, on the other hand, the potential it's got for that real end-to-end opening up of sharing of data, removing of silos. Actually, there's been historically quite a lot of power in those organisation silos that've got the data. So whether that's marketing or commercial or whatever. Actually, if everyone can start to see all of the same data, you can really have proper end-to-end processes in a way that we've never seen before. And that is a massive power that AI can bring. Now, the difficulty is, how do we get from where we are today, which is a series of small experiments in AI, to really powering the business, being that decision-making infrastructure in a way behind a business that allows true end-to-end business decision-making and very fast decision-making, which I've no doubt is where we're going. But I would actually, and I do advise people at the moment to just start playing, to do the small incremental change. But the next stage has got to be that business architecture around how do we use AI? What's the investment process? How are we making our decisions? Because actually ROI right now for AI projects is a very hard thing to prove. It's and where we're seeing it's on its own, it's not standing up. So we're talking to some of our clients about just have an AI pot. Just make sure you've carved off some innovation pots and you're getting started and getting working. But I think what we've got to keep our eye on, but it's very hard to go straight there, is this feeling of the end-to-end data, the end-to-end processes, the end-to-end decision-making in a business to really start knocking those silos down. But that it will come, but I don't think many companies are ready for that yet.
Well, it's a maturity thing, I guess, and a maturity thing both from internally within the organization, right, and what sort of muscles they have to kind of do that experimentation in a safe and progressive way, but also, I guess, the maturity of the market itself, right, in terms of the various different AI tools out there, and that combined with the pressure from what other businesses are doing and the kind of the FOMO, I guess, right, of everyone's doing something within AI. I guess how does all of that then feed into this decision of, okay, well, we want to move forwards and we want to progress, but what are the bits of the stack, as it were, that we decide to build ourselves because it makes sense to do that, versus actually there's some maturity out there in various sort of tools and propositions that actually are a bit more commodity and do feel like that's a more sort of,
the FOMO and the hype is a really big deal.
Yeah.
And also combined with that, people can access this. It's more accessible than most technologies before. Before you go, we can create this in your business environment and therefore you can use it. Whereas here, people can do it at home. They can access it anywhere. So you get lots of differing opinions of, we can do this, or we should do this, or my mate is doing this over in this company. They've seen amazing performance from this. And that's opinions all the way up from the C-suite down to individuals in their jobs. And that combined with the opportunities that individuals see to help their job, how do you pick through that and go, yes, that's something we can do, to making it more a question of what should we do? And that's that's that sort of framework piece. And that I think is the bigger challenge that everyone's got. How do you sort of have that? What's the decision process? What's the prioritization process? How do you even discover what is possible? And that's an age-old technology debate, right? Are you working on the things that you can work on, or are you working on the things that you should be working on? And that's always been there in technology, but AI has really put a focus on that because it's more accessible than most technologies have been in the past.
There's a lot of noise, right? That as you say, everyone's doing something that seems cool and interesting and exciting, right? The new shiny sort of demo, whatever. It feels like the industry is caught up with the idea that, okay, yes, with AI, we need to focus it on business goals. What are the business goals of the organization? And when we flow down from that, I think there's still even a piece beyond that where it's the business goals are one thing, almost the first part of the process. The real thing is the business outcomes. Is you can have a goal about something, but is there an outcome that goal needs to deliver on? Is there a way to measure that you're actually getting to that process? And I almost feel like there'll be another reckoning that you'll see in a while where we've jumped over the first hurdle of let's not just do everything just because we can. Let's focus it on a business goal. But then how do we actually hold ourselves accountable to that goal, delivering on an outcome that really is where the real value starts to come from? I
think it's putting a focus on, as I said, the C-suite to make sure, are we really clear what are the KPIs at the top of the tree? And then everyone can sort of relate to that and go, as long as we are feeding an outcome that will feed that will then ultimately increase that KPI or improve that KPI, that's the simplest way to describe it. And that's the easiest way to sort of recognize whether you are improving or succeeding.
I mean, I've been doing AI transformations for customers in various businesses for the best part of the last 10 years. And even 10 years ago, in the previous major wave of AI adoption, there was a big push to do sort of call center transformation, customer service transformation. And back then, a lot of the engagements I was involved in were driven by some nice, clear business outcome metrics around. Okay. So, for example, there was a move away from sort of voice conversation towards text chat, which we're all very familiar with now as a way of interacting with call centers. And that was driven by the perception, before we get to the AI part, about the fact that obviously, if you're an agent in a call center, you're holding many more conversations through text than you would be one-to-one on the phone. So you get a lot more efficiencies. There's an efficiency multiplier. And the idea was, when we're adopting AI, we want that multiplier to grow. So there was a target for how many parallel conversations we want to be able to have for one human in a call center. We want that number to be multiplied through the additional introduction of AI agents into the picture. And this was 10 years ago. That thinking, interestingly, I'm still seeing it now, but it's just that back then the challenges and the hurdles to get to that target, right, and the visibility to business stakeholders of the path to it was all a lot more difficult. But Simon's quite right. The latest technology change has meant that people can get a bit more of a sense of how this would actually work now. The barrier to doing that and to innovating and iterating on those things is much lower. And that is what's making the difference. But again, as long as we've got those specific outcomes in mind, but it is very possible. And again, for those kinds of initiatives, you can set some really clear targets, and that helps a lot. One of the things we've been doing for our customers is trying to help them filter out all those use cases that are coming through from people, because everyone has great ideas now, because there's that real sense of what the art of the possible might really be. But still, sometimes these things are a little bit sort of magical in the way they're shaped. And so there's a need to sort of filter that out. And we've actually found that having that capability in-house is quite useful. So we've helped our customers to build that within their teams, is the ability to sort of have that filter function on all the great ideas that people are coming out with and weeding out the good stuff from the bad. That for us has meant that we can get over 80% of the AI POCs we help our customers with into production, because the business cases are sound and because the filtering is done well in advance.
It makes it sustainable, doesn't it? It makes it, as long as you should always own that front end, that sort of filter at the beginning, the hopper. Yeah.
But some organisations we work with today are still struggle. Certainly, the tech departments are still struggling to get the business, their business colleagues, to put benefits or value or revenue or cost reductions on every piece that they're asking for. So the prioritisation process is really difficult, and it gets even harder with AI.
Yeah.
We should have reached a maturity where every project that's coming through to tech has got an ROI on it, has got a figure on it. But we're not even there yet in the pre-AI world in a lot of organisations, let alone with AI. And I think that's a real struggle. And when we get into that prioritisation, that investment case, there are less examples of where people are getting that real benefit. I think it will come and there'll be a wave, and there's more and more that we're starting to see. But right now, it is about asking that finance director to just believe for a while. And I think those are some of the conversations I'm sure you're having, Simon. It's always been when you're trying to replace a legacy system, or you're doing something because it's reducing risk and you're not reducing cost or increasing revenue. It's always hard to persuade your investment committee that you need the money. And I think that's sort of where we are with AI. It's, yes, we think it's exciting, it's innovative, but we can't quite tell you what it's going to do yet.
That's the danger with AI being such an exciting, I guess, technology with so many extreme use cases out there. It's very dangerous. There's no silver bullet to how technology operates in a business. It's the same question, and it's always been the same question. How do you become more of a partner to the business rather than a service? And we've been having that debate for decades. And yet this has now come in and gone, okay, now we really want something from technology. Can you just do it now? And if you haven't got those basics, you haven't got those relationships, you haven't got those partnerships, then you're going to fall over in exactly the same places that you would have done if you're just building out an e-com, or if you're building out your ERP, or if you're building out a data platform. You need to understand the business, you need to have the trust, and you need to have earned the right to have conversations. And so all of those basics around how technology operates are still true. Probably more so because the life cycle of developing AI solutions and testing them and learning them is so much quicker that you haven't got the time to sort of debate it. You should just get out there, try it, move on. And so I think that's the danger. You need to figure out what's your technology function and how does it operate in your business before you dive into, well, this is the solution we need.
I mean, how has that worked for you then, Simon, where you are? I mean, are there any interesting, journeys that you can recount of kind of where that experimentation has gone really well, where the business has kind of got really bought into something that you've been able to see through, to starting to deliver the value that's promised?
I'm a big fan of product management. So product management, i.e. having that sort of business partner, I guess, into the business where there is a person, whether it be in technology or not in technology, doesn't need to be in technology, but they are the bridge between the technology teams who deliver the capability and the business who will then use that capability. And those product managers are accountable for the value that it's going to generate for the business and the outcome. And therefore they are continuously compromising, prioritizing, describing, convincing, all of those pieces to make sure that it's got the right balance of, is this fit for purpose, and is it over-engineered, under-engineered, etc. And this is no different. So all this is there a need for something? In this case, it would be AI. Have we got the minimum viable product, or the minimum that we can experiment with to check that it works? Is it a scalable solution that we're even testing? It's a really difficult role. I think it's a really exciting role as well, because they need to have both extremes. They need to go, what are we doing tomorrow? And will it work in 5 years' time? Well, maybe not 5 years' time, but 18 months' time. And so I think that's how I've seen it work really well. And the people where you have really great people in those roles is where I've seen it work well. Lots of people talk about how do you prioritize things and how and what are the dimensions that you use, etc. Probably the most important dimension that I use is, do you have an active sponsor or stakeholder? Because especially with AI, you could build this amazing system, and if people don't want to use it, or if they don't know how to use it, or they haven't got the time to use it, it will sit on a shelf and it'll be out of date and it will be pointless and it'll be a waste of money. So that first bit, are you going to engage with it? Are you going to iterate with it? Because it needs continual feedback. That is almost more important than the outcome, actually, and the cost and the effort, because in some cases it will inform you what's the first thing you can try out. Because that active sponsor so the way my long-winded answer in coming to your question, the way I've seen that work is having those product managers or those really sort of active sponsors in the business work closely with the team, and they're willing to understand the complexities from a technology as well as describe the problem that is trying to be solved in the business.
And I guess, I mean, within what you're saying there, I mean, it's the operating model of the organization itself, right? That also is a precursor to that success, because it's yes, in the one hand, you're kind of marrying up capability with what the business is after, but I mean, Alex, maybe you've got some stories on this, but that you get organizations who have done the seemingly good work of kind of building out the thing, and then there's this kind of post-live dearth of kind of uptake, right, where people are just not imbuing that into their everyday sort of workflows and processes, and so I think in some of these cases there's a real sort of operating model thing to consider there, to really have that longevity of where that use case can come to fruition.
I would agree with that, and I think the product management led approach, I think, is the right kind of answer. And you talked about building bridges. That is definitely the gap that we're seeing with a lot of larger enterprises, is kind of not connecting between a sort of often the kind of the mission, the ownership of AI strategy, and trying to sort of answer the question, what is AI to us as an organization? That falls into the technology function. And in many cases that means that it manifests as, well, we need to build an AI platform and we need to build some cool AI things and then show the business all the cool AI things that we've built. And sometimes that goes well, but often, to be honest, it can be that an IT function might be on the back foot with the business anyway, so they've got some relationships to build irrespective of the AI piece. But the bridge building thing of actually being able to have a good, decent conversation about, well, what are the priorities? What do we want? What does this mean for your products that are actually generating revenue and adding value for the company? What would be the sweet spot for AI? Stepping out to have that conversation is often very difficult, and for I guess IT functions to get through. We've been helping our customers to kind of build out AI center of excellence functions, which gives them that kind of nexus of expertise in an organization that allows them to tackle that what is AI to us question, but without that becoming an answer about just pure technology and IT things, and actually having a means of reaching out to the business and identifying good use cases and progressing them through. The filter function piece as well sits within that kind of a unit. But then that gives them a means to iterate quickly and to actually have some sponsors on the business side, rather than sort of, again, building something that might be very technology focused, or building something that they hope the business will one day find useful, like a sort of kind of abstract platform services, or something that generates results to an imagined use case at arm's length. That level of interaction is really important as well. So there is a tendency in larger enterprises for business folk on product teams, for example, to have an idea and to sort of punt it over to IT to deal with. If it takes sort of 6-12 months for an answer on what that looks like to come back, then that usually doesn't result in the outcomes that people were imagining and a return on investment that justifies the effort.
So that AI center of excellence, I mean, that's something that you're helping organizations to set up, and that's kind of a fully cross-functional, I guess, makeup of people. Is that right?
That's right. So it's again, I'm the bigger picture view is organizations a lot of the time do need to build AI platform capability. Like, there are valid use cases for that, but often that gets in the way of the business value add piece. So what we try and do is make sure that our customers can build out the capability they need, but also have that enablement function that reaches out to the business, build out so that's the cross-functional aspect of it, change management capability if they need it, training and so on. So there is a part of the organization that's responsible for driving where we need an AI strategy, the actual strategy and execution of it holistically. It is possible to rely solely on the impetus of different business groups to figure out what the AI use case is for them, but there'll be a lot of reinventing of the wheel in my experience. There will be, even down to the level of sort of writing prompts for ChatGPT and so on, there'll be, each individual person might have their own preferences, experiences, and a lot of the time mythology around how this actually works and what the best options are. And at this point, I think most organizations can't afford to kind of, if they're going to adopt AI in a big way, that doesn't translate to the efficiency gain they need. It translates to everyone having an even more individually siloed way of working.
I think just building on that, the getting the governance around this, as we've mentioned earlier, is so key, because this is even more dangerous or full of opportunities depending on which side of the fence you sit. If you remember the days when Salesforce was selling directly into marketing departments and completely excluding the tech teams, and then realised that actually they couldn't get very far in the marketing if they wanted their data secure and they wanted it to join up with other systems to actually give them reports. Actually, you couldn't do it without your tech department, but there was that exciting period where marketing teams thought that they could just do all this with Salesforce and bypass the rest of us. We all learned a lot from that, partly the trust between the business and the tech teams. But I think it's going to be even more extreme with AI. As you've already said, everybody understands AI. It's very democratized. The amount of people that will be playing with this all over businesses and not going via the IT department, and it gives you security risks. But actually then when you do hit upon something that's really exciting and you need the data to join up, and those are always the two arguments for me as why get tech around the table. Well, you want your data to join up and you want the security. But with AI, the opportunities are vast, because you're going to have that person sitting somewhere completely different in a business and having a brilliant idea. But how do you engage from a tech point of view? And then, coming back to the build versus buy, how do we as technologists set up an architecture that allows you to spin up those ideas, embrace them, bring them in, try them out? And a lot of that comes down to people, it comes down to the trust, it comes down to ways of working, it comes down to product managers really being in tune with their areas. But at the same time, it comes back to, what on earth do we build as an architecture as well as a governance to bring all that together? It's a really exciting opportunity, but the amount of change around that, just change management, ways of working within a whole business as well as a tech team is there for discussion and for development.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess touching on the buy versus build thing. Maybe this is one for you, Simon. In terms of the capabilities in that space, does anyone have any views on where it instinctively feels naturally the place to be building more, just given I don't know the experimentation, the risk versus in terms of what's out there, buying stuff that really isn't I guess isn't something that necessarily the business needs to have so much control over or needs to worry so much about, sort of things like data and such. Really quickly, I remember this analogy that I think Jeff Bezos said from back in the day when electricity first came around, and you had these breweries, and some of the breweries sort of jumped on to sort of create their own, electricity factories and whatnot. And they went through a whole phase of thinking that was the right thing to do. And actually, there was another set of breweries that simply just rented out the electricity and kind of were able to kind of make a lot more profit on that, because it wasn't essential to kind of, what their business function was. So I feel like there's a similar sort of thing going here with some of that AI buy versus build decision that certain organizations have to take. But I don't know, Simon, whether you've got any.
I think the buy versus build debate is no different to any other technology. I think it's probably a little bit more cut and dry with AI from my perspective. So the traditional, if it's commodity, you should buy it. If speed is the essence, you should probably buy it. If you don't have the internal skills to be able to do it, you should probably buy it. If what you're trying to do is very unique to you, and maybe an example is, the LinkedIn algorithm. if that's their secret sauce, maybe they do want to build it. Or if your use case is so edge that no SaaS provider is ever going to prioritize it to be able to provide you with that, maybe you build that. So I think but that's the same with any technology. All of that's the same. I think what's slightly different with AI now is the prevalence of open source.
Right.
Because I think that makes it a little bit more sort of hazy. Whereas before it was, do you want to go, I'll give the ERP example again because it's top of mind for me at the moment. Are you going to use one of the big guys, or are you going to start building some of that functionality yourself? Whereas from an AI perspective, a lot of it's open source, a lot of it's out there. So actually building it yourself is not such a scary thing. I definitely don't think you should build your own. In most cases, you probably shouldn't build your own model because there are so many models out there that you can use. You probably shouldn't, build your own infrastructure because there's so much cloud out there and it's much more secure and it's safer and it's more scalable. So there's certain things that is very obvious that you should definitely use. I think the debate is probably more, have you got the capabilities to orchestrate it all? To really leverage the fact that there are different models that are better for certain things. I doubt anyone will say this model is brilliant for everything. Yeah. There is no MCP out there. There's nothing that is going, actually, that's brilliant for general queries, really detailed queries, really technical code building, whatever it is. Everyone likes different tools for different things. And that's going to speed up as more and more people come into the market, more and more options are out there. And so that ability to orchestrate it is going to come down to your internal capability, to your risk profile in the business, and your demand. It's always, it's simple economics, really. So from a River Island perspective, I'm lucky enough that I have quite a big internal engineering team and a very knowledgeable engineering team from an AI perspective. So we have built out an orchestration layer that allows you the security. So it gives you that security. So we can make sure that we have everyone coming through a single front door. We have that authentication, and then we make sure that when people access a model, and whether that be ChatGPT, GPT, Google Gemini, or Bedrock, or anything like that, they are using the enterprise versions. So it's not, we're not losing our data, or we're consciously treating the data in the way that we want it to be treated. And also we have shared context, so we can make sure that when you request something, we can add the River Island flavor, I guess, so that hopefully our users get more out of it than they would have done if they were just putting it into the public use of that. And it means we've got all the data, so we can sort of understand where are people really wanting to use this, and where should we be starting to look at enhancing that functionality. And I'm not going to go on too far, but obviously there's a cost. There's the cost element, which is the biggest risk to making it a free-for-all for everyone. Allowing, if you build it and make everything accessible, the more models you have, the more capability you have, the more people are going to use it, and the more risk you have then of the costs getting out of control. And when I talk about costs, I'm talking about context input tokens, or whatever you want to call it. Think storage from a data perspective. It's very easy now for someone to go, this is my report that I've got on a Monday, I'm just going to upload it and go summarize it for me. Then you might have, oh, that's brilliant, that person's just done a great job. And then you might get 150 people uploading the same report and asking the same thing. And yet, if they all do it individually, you're paying for the context for all of that. So there's a couple of things that, from an internal perspective, if you are building it, from a governance perspective, making sure that you've got those controls, making sure you're routing the right queries to the right MCP, making sure you're caching the responses where you can, making sure you're measuring the costs, you're monitoring it, and then you're either feeding that back through training, or you're restricting it through the context and the way that the model can be used, and you're evolving it. So I think it's not easy, right? But what it is quick. So the learning cycle is so quick, and so if you're going to build it internally, you need to have the capability to see all the learnings and respond to them, and then get the next iteration out as quickly as possible.
And I really think that's one of the key things about this buy versus build. It's it depends what we call buy build, of course. There are models obviously you can use, etc. But if I think the key thing is where you can and where you've got the capability or where you've got the size, then you can bring the right team in. There's real advantages to that build because of the modularization, but also the trying to keep up. It isn't just a question of putting an ERP in and then you can leave it. We know with AI, you have to keep updating. You have to keep making sure your data is up to date and your skills are up to date with your team. But the models are doing what you need to do. So that constant maintenance that you don't see as much with an ERP, you just upgrade every couple of years or whenever you can afford to do it. I think that's a really key element that is going to change our behaviour in the tech world with AI. And it's that, whether that's the human in the loop in the business side, or it's the keeping the data up to date, or it's making sure the model is still relevant. There is, and this is where we're going to start to see all those new roles coming in, which we've not had before, because of that making sure everything's still modern, still relevant, still working for what you need, which is ultimately your business outcome.
Yeah, I was going to say, new roles, but I think also new ways in which partnerships develop, right? I mean, it's like what you're saying about capability. You've got the capability within the business, I think, to really kind of build that thing and build it properly. But I almost see there being interesting evolutions of partnerships that you'll have with businesses, with consultancies, with AI native sort of advisors, to make sure that stuff is, as you're saying, constantly governed, monitored, and really sticky in the long term as well.
I've mentioned it before. I think it's very similar to the journey that data's been on. Lots of people build out their data platforms themselves. They have their data engineering, they have their reporting and management insight and things like that. Or they use data as a service, or they use a consultancy that they can flex up and down depending on the demand on the data and the scale of that data and the complexity. This is very similar. It's probably the normal curve that you would always go on. If you don't have that capability, well, then don't build it out straight away yourself. Use a third party to experiment and build a return on investment, a business case, whatever it might be. And then you can decide off the back of that, that can be one of your outcomes, to go, is there a long-term need for me to have this skill set in-house? It's that age-old debate of, should we have data scientists or not? Have I got the right data quality? Have I got the right demand? And will I make the most out of that type of skill set? Or should I bring that in as and when I need it? Because it's quite a scarce resource. AI is very similar. And there are options out there that you can take it as a service, or you can use agencies to give you that capability. It is tempting to go, AI is the answer, so I need to build a team. But if you can't feed and water that team, they're either going to get really frustrated, or you're not going to set it up for success and it's not going to succeed.
I mean, Alex, what do you see in terms of, well, I can see you.
I was going to say, so I better say something about that. So, I mean, I totally agree. There's a lot of parallels. And for us, it's the same kind of model. So I mentioned the AI COE approach we've taken earlier. That is very much helping the customer to build their capability rather than becoming dependent on us as CI&T. And again, we do a massive amount of business in sort of data platform migrations and modernization as well. And it's much the same story, because realistically, getting yourself into a healthy state is what the customer needs, and building an enormous team to deliver that is usually not the right answer for an enterprise, even with a vast amount of data to manage and govern. But our approach is to make sure that, again, once the customer has got their lakehouse architecture, Databricks, Snowflake, whatever set up, then they are able to take ownership of that on the model they want. Some customers, again, will find they have a large in-house data team that they want to be the stewards of this. Others have an operating model where the data is more productized, but that requires its own kind of business change piece of people understanding what it means to be the product owner of data. The same thing applies to the AI case, as you say. So where we've, getting yourself bootstrapped into a place where you can reliably take POCs to production, you can reliably identify good use cases, and you can reliably communicate with business folk about what it is they need and what the priorities would be, and what they actually want to measure what results they're actually going to track against. Having those capabilities built out, that's the investment that I think our customers are trying to make, is making sure that they can do that. So for us, we're sort of scaffolding, I suppose.
I wanted to go back to something that we were saying earlier. There are cases where I think there's a temptation to, build the capability, build the team, build the thing on top of an existing workflow or process within the business, when actually it's the workflow and the process really that is the thing that you need to sit down and work out, because sticking AI over the top is it's AI over a crappy workflow or process.
I've definitely seen that. And I've actually seen, the journey from, wouldn't it be nice if we had AI here, to now we have an AI solution, to now we have a complex AI solution that can take over large parts of the workflow, to, oh, this workflow isn't very good. Shall we change the workflow? Oh, now the workflow is much better. Oh, now we don't need AI. Okay, well, now we've got a great automated workflow without an AI. And that's a real journey the customer went on. But the net cost saving means that, I mean, we skimmed over it briefly, I think, earlier, but there is an operational overhead to looking after a live AI system, and it's not trivial in an age when a lot of companies are used to sort of doing managed service outsourcing of, keeping the lights on activity for applications and infrastructure that are, are known quantities. Something that has the sort of non-deterministic quality and rapidly evolving behavior of an agentic system, for example. I think it's much harder to outsource that to a managed service provider. So that means that you end up having to take on some of that responsibility in-house. If your goal was to save the efficiency for some analysts, but in exchange you have to have 5 data scientists on hand to watch over a live system, just in case it goes wrong, that doesn't really add up from a TCO perspective, total loss of ownership. So yeah, that having gone through that and realized that actually this was AI as a lever to being able to interrogate your processes. People have an appetite for change as a result of how visible and, as we said earlier, how accessible the Gen AI technology is. That sometimes results in a long-term AI solution in production. Sometimes it results in that as an interim step towards a state where actually we've reimagined our process. That reimagined process might be a more AI-friendly process that delivers better outcomes. It might be a traditional process that we've gone through that cycle of the AI comes in, we realize what we were doing wrong, the AI goes out again.
But I think that is, I always like to, if you've got a hook, use it, right? So the AI is getting people excited about technology and about using it. So, but you're right, as we said before, there's no silver bullet. So in the same way that we were debating RPA, can you just put robotics over the top of it? Well, no, because if it's a really bad process, yes, you do that if you know you're not going to change that system for a while and it's a consistently repeatable process. It's exactly the same from an AI perspective. But what you can do is not just go, yeah, well, I'm not sure about that. You can actually use it and go, brilliant, you're interested in it, but you need to have that maturity and the process. And maybe that is using a third party to cut through the emotion and make sure there is an independent view of it, or you've got the internal capability, but you can't shortcut it. I agree. I think if you try to shortcut it, you're going to end up back in the place that you needed to be in the first place, reviewing the process, reviewing what are you trying to achieve. Let's not try to just assume what we're doing is the right thing we need to do, and we just need to make it quicker. So I think it's a real opportunity there, that you just sort of want to capture that excitement and use that to build the sponsorship.
What I'd add to that is I absolutely agree. You got to understand your process. You got to understand what you're trying to get out of it. But don't think you can't do anything with AI because you've got to re-architect and re-engineer all your processes first. And I do see certainly some of the larger consultancies peddling this. Actually bring us in, we'll do a huge end-to-end process review, because you're never going to get started on AI. Your data will never get to where you need to. And we've seen this with data, haven't we? Please let's come in and completely refigure all your data and we'll put everything on a single data layer. And you never get there. So you got to be really clever about how you're prioritizing, get going on some stuff. Just do one end-to-end piece of work and prove the benefit. Get everyone excited. Get a squad on it. Rather than Alex, you're itching to come in there. So over to you.
I just remember. No, I was just thinking. I remember. So I mentioned this. I'll pick on the call center scenario again because I think it's quite intelligible. But this was exactly the journey we took with some of those customers where, and the idea was not let's reimagine what a call center is going to be like. It was very, very specifically let's try and make it more efficient for an agent that's a human agent who's doing text chat to serve more customers. And the question we would always ask going into these things is, do you have some chat transcripts that we could use to train the model? Or do you have some sort of ideal scripts for how you would interact with the customer? And that seems like a fairly innocent question, but the answer was often, oh, no, we don't have those things. We have a rough idea. We have some guidance notes and some documents that we give to our customer service people. But then actually that then sort of a light bulb goes on and somebody goes, well, these guys are off building AI things. Maybe we should interrogate our process a bit more. And then there's a sort of fairly organic and realistic and sensible journey that the company can go on towards actually finding opportunities to tighten these things up. As we put our AI systems into that call center, people learned more about what the easiest path through some of these customer conversations they were having over and over again actually were. But yeah, if we had gone in and said, fix all the process now, and then we'll talk about AI, I think.
Conversely, you could use AI to gather that.
Yeah,
because
we
we're using that quite a lot for sentiment analysis and things like that, where you go, what are your customers saying? And we've got all this data, and picking through that and figuring out how do you even consume that? What are the trends? And what's improving? What's not improving? There are some real shortcuts that you can use AI to cut through it and pick through that. So I think you need to understand what the need is and what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes you need to do the process engineering. Sometimes actually this is a way to avoid having to do all that. In particular, I keep going on about data and reporting, but in the past, the answer was always have a single source of data and then build this huge reporting suite across it. And then you can generate these reports to potentially answer one specific question. Whereas now you can just do a semantic query onto the data source and just ask the question. And there will be a lot of cases where you don't need a report. So you may need the report for the point in time view across everything, but a lot of the questions that people need to make decisions and run their business may be repeatable questions or single questions, and that changing the behavior and learning how to use AI in the right way is probably one of the biggest challenges, as well as actually building the capability.
And a huge game changer.
Yeah.
With AI.
I guess to your point earlier, that the talk to your data use case is something we're seeing everywhere now, and that's something which I think is nicely commoditized. So that's I think for most companies going to be a nice clear buy use case, provided you've got the data sorted out, which is a big if. To your point earlier, the value of having the reports there is that we're not burning tokens, generating the same data again. So that's the balance that we have to find with those use cases.
And that's where it really becomes interesting on the buy versus build, to bring it back to sort of a topic. You've got a lot of the data providers like Snowflake who are building that semantic layer over the top of it, so that you actually don't even need to figure out how to do that querying and how to do the the agent front end access to your data. They will just provide it as a service. And so it's picking through, are we drifting towards having single providers who can own that entire layer or all that decision processing, or do you get the benefit of having the sort of best of breed approach? So.
I guess on that note, what else? It's hard to predict anything, but are there any other sort of trends like that we kind of feel you can start to see that's where the market's going in terms of where where the capability and tools are going, or where businesses are going with their own thinking around what they feel they need more flexibility, control, and ownership of within that space?
Alex will know a lot more data points on this, but I think from our perspective, one, it's definitely looking at low code. So how can it plug and play, because we want to drop stuff off and bring it in really easily. And in a lot of cases where we go, we should really be building that out, we want to do that. In 3 weeks later, some open source model has actually created it. So it's not being too proud to drop the stuff that you've built and replace it with something that is open source, that is leveraging the insight and learnings from the wider industry. And I guess the last thing, so those two things, and then the last thing would be probably on from generative AI to agentic AI. And that's a very sort of cliched thing to say, but I think as the maturity of how you consume these models, how you interact with them, I think people will move more to agentic AI because it allows you to curate the customer experience into all those models. And it means that actually, from a tech perspective, it's easier for me to swap things in and out because no one's actually accessing the model directly. They're accessing it through this interface that we control the conversation. And therefore, you can just either enhance it, add to it, or you can remove things from it.
I guess broadly, my perception is that for the generative AI use cases, we're more likely to use kind of commodity AI product services from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google. Other providers are available. But I guess when we move into the agentic use cases, you're likely to see at least an important critical mass of build work that happens with inside companies because of the nature of what it is you're asking from those agents. If we unpick it realistically, you're hoping for a solution to a very specific challenge within your company. And I'm kind of inclined to say, like, if those challenges could be commoditized, then a lot of the time that isn't going to translate to an AI use case. Like you'll go through, if you've got a SaaS provider that's solving a very thorny business problem for you as a service, then you probably want them to use as little AI in that process as possible. You want it to be deterministic. But when you've got your own kind of challenges in your business processes that you want to optimize, you want to have an agentic workflow or multi-agent flow in your in things that are going to make an important difference to your value streams, then you realistically want to treat those as differentiating capability. That's the architect's mantra, isn't it? Differentiators that are worth investing in across the life cycle. So design, build, test, run from within your company. And I suppose that's where we're seeing the kind of rationale with our customers as well, is that if we're building agents, they're going to be ours and they're going to be hugely valuable to us. On the flip side, for us as a services provider, we have our own massive AI management platform that we've built, because for us that is a differentiator. Us being able to bring the platform and a library of agents to our customers, that for us helps us to stand out in the market and add a lot more value for our customers. Would I recommend that to a small, medium business? Probably not unless AI services was core to their proposition. Where you've got an agentic workflow, realistically, if it's highly specialized to your use case, then I would expect that's something you need to take some ownership of.
Yeah, I think for me, the most interesting right now, certainly in the retail space, is the move from SEO to GEO. And the search being replaced by the agentic world, and that relationship that the retailer is going to have with the customer going forwards. What's the future of the website? What's the future of the store? Now, I think those retailers that have got physical stores are going to find it easier to keep that direct relationship with their customers. But the pure plays, it's going to be very interesting. How do they? So if the agent is going to be suggesting what I'm buying and how I'm shopping in the future, there's somebody or something in the middle of me and the retailer's relationship. And how do we show up? And I think that for retailers, owning the GEO going forwards is going to be a crown jewel. They're going to have to think that through, work that out, and then what's the tech behind that, and how much of that is your own IP, and the retailer is going to need to keep control of that, as they do with SEO nowadays in the retail space particularly. It's fascinating.
I mean, it's going to be really interesting to watch a bit from the sidelines, actually, if I'm honest, on this one, because you've got the Amazon is your very obvious example of where come to us to search. John Lewis, as an example, who have just pushed their whole catalogue out to ChatGPT. So, it's big players are experimenting in this right now, and it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out. But I think what will be interesting is it will move forward, and so there's almost no right or wrong. You can change your mind, you can change direction on it. The level of investment is not so prohibitive. You do need to make a conscious decision to experiment with something, but you can do it. It's accessible to everyone.
And like you say, it's happening now. And I think I saw a prediction, might have been IBM, I can't remember, where they're predicting that 10% of retail spend is going to be through agentic this year, right, by peak this year. I mean, let's see, but it is fast and it's happening.
Our perception, I think, is that there is kind of a race going on, right? And it's a race between retailers that want more traffic and transactions driven through their website and the sort of ChatGPT native experience through apps built into ChatGPT. I think perception we have at the moment is that most companies probably will need to do both.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to be found by those agents, but you need to have a really great experience on your site, because I think at the moment, certainly for UK and definitely for EU businesses, even if a customer is, discovering you through a chatbot experience outside of your domain, then they're probably still fulfilling the transaction on your site. So being able to navigate there, being able to, if they want a conversational experience, that needs to be great on your site too, and that needs to be probably yours. There's a kind of third option here as well, which is that if you have a great website, these days it needs to be navigable by these AI agents, and mostly they aren't. And we've seen this case even where that's been the intention, just watching sort of with dismay these sort of test bed agents sort of just floundering and getting lost is quite dispiriting. So being very deliberate about that will be a theme as well, I think.
I definitely think there'll be a huge uptake on agentic commerce. My slight watch out would be everyone thought that you needed to build shops in the virtual world, and everyone was going to go onto Sim, and everyone was going to do all that, and no one did. And now I don't think it's as comparable, right? Because I think we're already seeing the uptake, and people have these models as their homepage instead of a Google search. So it is a material difference in terms of uptake, but there will still be huge audiences out there who will not use it. So I think, think there's being too carried away, and now that will differ from brand to brand. Some brands, it will be everything, and it will be a huge proportion of their traffic, and some it will be a particular proportion of their traffic, and they still need to cater for, it's the age-old physical shops versus digital shops. You will now have physical, digital, and agentic. So, and there will be loads of other different options on how to access your brand or your product. And so it's really being conscious about what are you allowing and what are you supporting, and what's the right channel for your brand. It's the same with franchises, marketplace, wholesale. This is just yet another way to access it. Exactly.
There's so many things. When we were, those of us old enough, probably only me around here, but those of us old enough to have worked through the internet boom, the things that we thought were possible was literally just standing up a website, and that was revolutionary. And you think what we can do now with digital, and we don't know. We only know, a slither of what AI is going to be, and we've only just learnt the words agentic. What's coming next year, the year after, the year after. It's huge.
I think what it is doing is it is definitely rewriting the rules. If I bring this to a different use case, which is very relevant from a fashion retailer, digital generation of images. So traditionally, that's been very much, I'm not going to mention the brands, but there are certain software providers that you go, if you want to generate content or imagery, you go to these people. Actually, that's more accessible than ever using open source. And in some cases, better. And that is, the difference on price alone is incredible, and the accessibility. But again, are your people in your businesses using it for business purposes? Are they starting to use it for personal purposes? And so have you got the right controls to make sure that you're managing your cost base, etc.? But the possibilities are increasing exponentially, and that's what's really exciting. It's challenging those old rules that were so prohibitive to get in and change, and now it can be changed. And that should be better for customers ultimately.
Yeah, it's good. I'd seen a report that says in retail they're expecting at least 1.5% of productivity gains over the next sort of 2 years, if that. And for £1 billion business, that's £15 million. It is significant numbers we're talking, and for those bigger and bigger organisations. So the prize is there in all sorts of use cases like that, or from there's so many things, from physical shops and being able to monitor theft in your shops, loss prevention, waste management is going to be a huge one for certainly for the food retailers. And the more you add up those incremental changes like the digital imagery, you start to get you start to get that significant level of cost saving, and I think that's coming, and I think we'll be embracing that very, very quickly.
There's definitely still a transformation journey that I'm seeing customers on, though, so it's kind of curious to see how that will play out. But to give you an example, there's a few conversations I've had in the last couple of months with customers in different industries who are all, experimenting with more kind of conversational experiences to their customers and with more kind of generation of marketing copy and things like that, which I would describe as fairly low-hanging fruit on the spectrum of the art of the possible for AI solutions. But anyway, those conversations often get stuck in a place when we're talking about the kind of the front door question, whether people are coming in through ChatGPT or whether they're going in through the company's own website. There's a perception that, the website, whatever goes on there, needs to be really clean and crisp and have corporate tone of voice and be really careful about how it positions related to competitors and all the habits that we're all used to around the way we think about, online presence. But then correspondingly, the idea that ChatGPT could say anything about us, it's fine. It's not our problem. And I think that's a journey that people are going on. That's the kind of, the cultural challenge with this stuff is, well, it must surely be somewhere between those two things. It can't be that you're quite happy for ChatGPT to say any old thing, or again any other chatbot to say any old thing about your brand and your products and how you position relative to competitors, but you're going to be really, really cagey about that. There must be some middle ground, and that is a real journey, I think.
I think that fear is not only as a brand, but also, Anna, to your point around there's lots of efficiencies out there. It makes people quite scared, and in some cases they might know there are things that we could do that's going to be better, but they will hold back on those examples because there'll be a fear of jobs. And I think that's the challenge from a business perspective, because there's the adage at the moment, which is, AI is not going to replace your job. It's people using AI. They're going to replace your job. So it's finding those use cases where people can use AI to create more value and get people excited about it, rather than almost holding back because of the fear of it will replace them. I think that's the balance, and that's the challenge, to sort of go, is it just a cost saving initiative, or is it actually, yes, there are some cost saving things, but there are some growth opportunities that our employees will be involved in and use AI to really turbocharge the business and deliver great products and more products to our customers. And that's the exciting bit, and that's the bit that we need to try to get both sides of that balance.
I guess that is the sort of the selling point for, I guess, highly productized sort of agentic delivery and runtime platforms on public cloud and so on. The idea is that you all that stuff, yes, you will need to be able to do it sooner or later in-house, but realistically, if you can't cut through to the actual use cases and you can't get people on that journey as to what the art of the possible is and overcoming their fears and reservations, then all of the other stuff around your own internal guardrail capability and how you do orchestration, that will all be by the by, because you won't make any progress with it will have been for nothing, right?
Yeah.
So that's the speed point, is being able to quickly get to the value, and then you can play catch up on the platform capability.
Yeah. For all of the people that might be listening to the podcast, I mean, for each of you, is there sort of one kind of key practical bit of advice that you'd give leadership teams or teams owning the AI question within their business?
I think from my perspective, I'd approach it always in two streams. So one is the tactical stream. Right. Support your teams, tell them what's available, what they can use, what they can't use, get a policy out there, and capture the immediate demand and try to deliver to that. So that's the just keep going and experiment and don't wait. And then the second one is almost the converse of that. Figure out what your big bets are and do that strategic review across your business and understand where you think the really big opportunities are. And that may take time, because you may need to unpick the process, but you don't need to wait, because you can almost have that tactical stream working. So I would suggest in those two streams.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I would encourage CIOs, CTOs to be having those conversations with the business, less about AI, but more about what's the pain at the moment, or where are you not being able to make decisions quickly enough that is causing you pain. And then you can start talking about AI could be one of the solutions. So I think it's sort of steering away from, like we didn't used to talk about data. We used to talk about decisions you're trying to make. Actually, try to have those conversations across the whole enterprise. I think building on Simon's point, yes, absolutely, be doing your tactical stuff and playing with it in tech. We haven't actually even mentioned there's a lot of low-hanging fruit within the tech department and the coding element. I mean, that's big. Let's play with that. But I think that conversation with the business is about what's your biggest pain? What could you do if something seismic was to change? And then you get that really big opportunity.
Yeah. Tend to agree with that. I think I mentioned it a couple of times, but I mean, being ready to be able to rank and assess the utility of some of the candidate use cases you have, and actually being able to have, as you say, that connection with the business is really key. It's very easy to build a kind of IT-centric or tech-centric innovation function, and that has its place. But having a means for those people to be in contact with business stakeholders and deliver against their use cases, that is the way that you'll succeed. Otherwise, you'll end up with lots of great things in a lab somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for myself, before we wrap up, I think I'd echo what you're saying, Anna, is that I think, and this is nothing new, right? But the technology has always been the enabler of what the business is able to do and how the business creates value. And I think the more that any organization can really remember, I guess, kind of what's in service of what, I think that is what's going to hold you instead for at least making the right decisions, as things move on. So thank you for my wonderful guests today in this mode of host on Tessiant Talks. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. I'm sure we could have all talked for hours more on lots of other sort of wonderful things that are happening in this space, but hopefully that's been informative for those listening, and thank you to all for joining.
Thank you.
Cool.